Welcome to AI PHYSEC Today, the physical security industry's first podcast dedicated to uncovering the mysteries and opportunities around AI. I'm your host, Morron, and I'm really excited for this episode's guest, where we talk about ONVIF AI Standards. Meet Leo Levit, chair of ONVIF's steering committee. Leo has spent many years in the technology, innovation, and product management fields. Beginning with a master's degree in electronic engineering, his professional career has included multiple positions in several multinational companies such as Ericsson and Sony. And during Leo's 20-plus year career, he has contributed to technology adoption in telecommunications, security, and video analytics fields. Currently, Leo is the Director of Systems Integrations at Access Communications. Now, let's jump into the conversation with Leo to learn more about ONVIF AI Standards. Hey, Leo, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, and super excited to talk about ONVIF AI Standards. You know, for someone like me that's been in the industry for 13 years, standards has been super important around, especially around the video technology and possibly other technologies. But I think this idea of where AI fits into that is a really interesting discussion. And so when this hit my desk, I was like, we got to talk about that, right? And obviously, who better than you to sit down and chat with about that? With that being said, before we jump into the line of questioning, if you could just go into your background for the audience so they get to know you a little better.
Yeah, well, my name is Leo Levit, and I'm chair of ONVIF steering committee. And if we look at what I've done so far through my career, a lot of that tasks was within major technological companies. It's Ericsson, it's Sony, and nowadays Access Communications, where I hold position as Director of System Integration. So I think one of the biggest passion I have in my life is actually making technology understandable and easy to consume, because we have a lot of fantastic pieces of innovation that's quite difficult to comprehend, and especially understand what is the purpose and how can it make life better for the users. And I think I'm super happy when you reached out about AI and talks about that, because it's exactly where we are today. It's a fantastic piece of technology. It's been around for a very long time, but I think it's now where it's really coming to something that is useful and adopted by the users. And I think this is where ONVIF, as a standardization organization within security industry, have a massive role to play to unify usage of that technology from interoperability point of view, meaning that different parts of the system from different vendors can work together. So this is what I've done so far and what I'm passionate about. So that's me, basically.
Awesome. So Leo, for the people who know ONVIF from the IP video days, can you start with what ONVIF actually is and why it was created back in 2008?
Well, I'll kind of connect it to myself and just try to create an easy explanation what ONVIF is. So I live in Sweden. We talk Swedish in this country. Tiny little country with a tiny little language. If I would be talking to you and your listeners in Swedish, we probably wouldn't understand each other, or they would definitely don't understand me. But we agreed to use a common language. We call it English, right? In this way, representatives from different locations or different vendors or manufacturers can talk the same language and understand each other. So if you keep this in mind, this analogy, you can actually understand what ONVIF was all about. So when ONVIF was established in 2008, one of the biggest problems that we've seen on the market at that time is that video management system, in order to connect to the camera, had to write the drivers for every camera and every manufacturer specifically, because there wasn't a unique way to connect the IP camera to the video management system or a network recorder. So ONVIF at the beginning is an attempt to unify communication protocols between different parts of the security system, finding this universal language, that English of the security industry. Okay, so and this is what's been primarily tasked for ONVIF over the last time, is to find the technologies, agree on the protocols for the interfaces where physical security devices connect with the systems. It started with streaming, storage, and then we expanded the scope to access control, and then with advancements of artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, and the rise of analytic solution on the market, we got to standardizing the interfaces for metadata. So this is This is what ONVIF does. And a quick just story about us. We are currently over 500 member companies, global organization. 100% of this organization is member driven. The innovation that we work on is driven by our members. There is no kind of ONVIF core that does things. If the members, which are active players on the market, believe that there is a piece of technology to be discussed, standardized, agreed upon, they bring it to the discussion, only facilitate the discussion, and the specifications are done by the members, the conformance done by the members, and all the development work done by the members. ONVIF also hosting and providing tools for self-certification of the devices and other products. As a part of the process we call conformance process, meaning that products that are conformant very clearly comply with a certain requirement that ONVIF profiles has. And ONVIF profile is a subset of the specification we have. So we have a number of profiles that are available on our webpage, and members can access the certification tools, certify the products themselves, upload that to the ONVIF website. And I think this is one of the biggest values we have to the market, is that we're hosting the database of conformant products. I think we have over 32,000 conformant products in the database, and those are the products that are conformant to one or several profiles. So if a system integrator, for instance, not really sure whether the device A would work with system B, they can actually check whether those products are conformant to a specific profile in the field of interest, let's say video streaming, and they can actually verify a specific hardware with a specific software version on that hardware would work with a specific VMS or NVR, whatever it might be. So I think this is what ONVIF does. So we develop specification, we package them in profiles, we provide tools for self-certification, we keep record of the certificates that we provide to the vendors, and we inform market about what products are actually conform.
So curious, from a consumer's perspective, like the end user's perspective, like what problem is ONVIF solving? Like, is it because we've now created a common language, there's ease of interoperability, it's maybe easily understood from their integrator that actually would install these systems, what works with what? Is it preventing lock-in for other closed systems? Like, what problem do you think that ONVIF is solving for end users?
Spot on. One of the biggest problems we're solving for the end user is avoidance of vendor lock-in. Let's be honest, security systems are not cheap, right? It's a substantial investment. When you design your security system, you design it to the very large extent according to your current needs. Ideally, you have some possibility to have your crystal ball and see what the future will bring and have some plans for the expansion. But it's ultimately impossible to predict what you will need in a longer time. If you have a system that is closed and you need develop in a way that you need equipment from other manufacturers because your current all-in-one thing doesn't really support your increased demands, then you have a problem. And the problem is that the component that probably could solve your future need doesn't really work with the existing system because they don't speak the same language. But if we work with open type of system, the system that share the same interface, openly work with each other, comply to the same set of rules, it's much easier to future-proof your investment. So I think one of the biggest, I wouldn't say sale point, but good thing that we bring to end customers specifically is safeguarding the investment they do in security systems. Well, making sure they're not locked into a specific vendor or system, and they can grow as they need.
Yeah, certainly there's a share of lock-ins that are happening in the industry, which we'll cover in a different day. Today, we're talking about AI ONVIF standards. So on this note, where ONVIF has absolutely solved a huge problem by giving the industry this common language to let hardware and software talk, no matter what the manufacturers are, let's say. But what is the equivalent problem you see today with AI that makes standards necessary again?
I think, as we mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, AI is a fantastic piece of technology, and has been there for a very long time and been massively developing over the last 10 years. And we see a big growth of analytics application utilizing this technology, both applications that are utilizing the edge devices, where actual analysis done on far edge device like camera or sensor, but also cloud-based application and cloud-based algorithms where resources are virtually, unlimited. With this growth, I think we see the same pattern as we see with the other systems. A lot of the innovation is done in a very close environment. It's very easy to do innovation where you don't need to care about anything around you. You do your piece of work, you do it the way you need to do, you isolate it, you shield from the need to be, listening to other systems, and you do that in a very efficient way. That's why we see a lot of groundbreaking technologies done in a very contained environment. But when you start to realize the need of sharing the information produced by AI algorithms, either on the device, on the different parts of the systems or elsewhere, with other recipients of this information that could, enrich your experience. This is where you're starting to have problem, because the interfaces between different products are not standardized the same way we have for, let's say, again, video streaming in security industry. There we have a very kind of solid ground how we do it. So actually, I would say that with the AI or data produced by AI algorithms in different sensors, it's very similar to what problem we had in the beginning of ONVIF 2008. A willingness from different systems to work with each other without massive engineering effort to be done in order to connect those systems. So it's very similar, but to a completely different level and with a completely different market demand.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll probably dive into a couple of ways to unpack that more, like, especially, so from my perspective, being an AI agency, we really developed just using generative AI. And so it'll be really interesting to see like how the edge changes and what is aggregated in the cloud completely and not necessarily on the edge. And I'm seeing that with manufacturers now where they mix, or they have a large or a language vision models, and they're doing processing on the edge for the core objects that cameras need to detect, but then further processing in a SaaS environment where generative AI is most easily deployed. And so I'm sure we'll unpack that a little bit more, but I do want to talk a little bit about this AI working group that you have. And so you've launched this AI working group, and even though there's not a formal AI profile yet, what is the group actually trying to figure out right now?
Yeah, we started the AI working group basically because, as I mentioned from the beginning, our members see the need to come up with a standardized way of communicating between different parts of their system powered by artificial intelligence. So the working group is at the very, very early days now. So the current work is trying to understand what exact use cases we want to solve, whether it's transmitting a certain set of information, or it's how you control your models. So this is where I think it's a little bit too early to really say what the profile will be. And I probably should talk a little bit about the general kind of flow of events that need to happen before profile is actually out. So you will understand where the ONVIF AI working group is at the moment. So we have something we call technical committee and working groups connected to the technical committee. And this is where the core specification work is done. So this is the hardcore engineering teams getting together, defining the interface specifications, all the bits and pieces in this language between two different parts of the system. So defining how the API works. When this is done and everybody agree on the actual specification, then the next step starts. And this is how to make sure that people who want to implement this on both sides have actually a way of testing that and verifying that what they've done is actually correct. So this is what we call a conformance process. And we have a different committee called Technical Services Committee, or TSC. And the working group within this committee, or working with this committee, focusing on profile creation. So profile creation process is basically where members get together and define what parts of the specification will end up in the profiles and how you test it, what test requirements do you have, how the test cases look like, how to develop the test tool that will verify that for you. etc., etc. And then this is where the profile is created. So the hardcore or the pure R&D work is within the working groups working with specifications. So this is where the work is today. In the very, very early days of specification creation, looking at what use cases in security industry this group need to solve, whether it's how to transmit data that from already analyzed, how to adapt to a specific interface requirements, or how do we package data or data formats and structures. So this is where discussion topics today. And I think it's very interesting to see how this group evolves, because with the new players coming in, that realizes this is a discussion about AI in security industry, how to standardize that. I want to be a part of that. And every new member that coming into this play, coming with ideas and objectives and actually a lot of expertise. This is what I think is fantastic to see now. All this expertise from different companies, different continents, getting together, defining the way ONVIF will work with artificial intelligence in the security industry system. So I think it's very interesting to see. But again, today, I think it's a little bit too early to predict how the profile will look like. Will it be profile? Will it be something else? We will see. But I think, as we've always been working before, we cannot ignore the fact that every company in the playground are working with this technology. So we predict, but also see currently that there is a problem in interoperability transmitting this data that's generated by those systems. So this is why we're doing that, and this is how we do.
Got it. One thing I do wonder, as they figure out what the profile is, or maybe it's not a profile at all, is the biggest question of all is, what letter are we going to choose, right?
Well,
I'm thinking X, so like Elon's X, maybe that's the one.
Maybe. Well, I'll pass your proposal to a communication committee who is actually responsible for the naming. Yeah, there is a certain naming convention, but ultimately it's different committees getting together, defining how it should work. But yeah, thank you for the proposal.
You're welcome. Formally submitted here on the podcast. So let's talk about the information that these AI systems can exchange and maybe get a little bit more specific. So when you talk about standardizing how AI systems exchange information, while it is early on in the standard, I'd imagine that some of this has been discussed. What kind of information are we really talking about, though? Like, is it the events? Is it objects? Is it context? Is it natural language? All the above? What information is being exchanged with these AI systems that need to be standardized?
All of the above, but to different extent. That's a very short question. And let us travel back in time a couple of years. I think if you know, ONVIF released Profile M some years ago. And Profile M is a profile that's specifying interfaces for metadata and events. So we saw already at that point of time, and I think this profile been released some years ago, but even earlier we've seen a need of standardizing metadata and special object types to be transmitted from a sensor to a video management system or whatever other system you want, whatever other application you want to consume this data in. So I would say that Profile M is ONVIF's first attempt to kind of step into the world of AI and standardizing the information format, the packaging and the interfaces and the data structures for that. But I think at that point of time, it was fantastic. And actually, Profile M, I think even today, is the fastest growing profile in number of conformant devices. So the pace of adoption been amazing. It was really, really amazing to see how many vendors understood the value and kind of developed the implementation that is conformant with Profile M requirement. But I think the profile, as good as it is, still rather limited, and the development going further, and it's not as contained as the Profile M suggests. So we have a definition of certain object types, vehicle, human, or face, or license plate. But we see that the operator would probably rather see what happens in the scene than in a specific camera, and a combination of different cameras or even different sensors, and not necessarily cameras. And so I think this is where we a lot of discussion going on how to analyze more of a scene logic rather than an object. So this is where we're at today. And as I mentioned before, it's super early days, and it's we'll see how that will develop, but I'm pretty sure it will develop.
Yeah, I wrote a couple things you said down around data structures and scene logic, which is interesting to me because so AIs are only as good as the data that they're given. And if the data is always structured, if it's structured the same, then really would the manufacturer's value, I guess, mostly live on the VMS side than on the camera side. If all the cameras, if all the data for the AI from the camera, let's say on the edge, is structured the same, so that they have to differentiate from the VMS side. So for those manufacturers that also make cameras that want to say we do any sort of edge detection, do you think that structuring the data basically commoditizes cameras for the future then? How do you feel about that?
No, no, I don't think so, actually. I think it's actually gives manufacturers additional possibility to provide value when it comes to quality of data, because I mean, structure the data doesn't necessarily gives you the assurance that the data is correct. It just gives you the assurance you can read the data, you understand what is where, but it doesn't tell you how it's been produced, whether it's correct or not. If it's consistent, it's reliable, that the flow of the data is, can be trusted, etc., etc. This is I think, where manufacturers have a possibility to step up and provide additional value. So no, I don't believe it's commoditizing. It's actually the other way around. I think it's very difficult to talk about AI without touching another technology, which is cloud, because what we see today, and you mentioned, it's super easy to deploy. Yeah, it's super easy to deploy in cloud environment. And when you have 5, 10, 15 cameras that's streaming and analyzed in cloud, where you have unlimited resources, you can spin off the new instances in your tenant almost immediately. That's great. But if you have tens of thousands of cameras in your systems, analyzing that video streams in cloud becomes extremely complicated and honestly very expensive. So this is additional value that I think camera manufacturers have a possibility to provide, is to do a lot of pre-processing on the edge. But in order to do that, you need to have a universal interface from the device to whatever you are analyzing, doing your post-processing. So you're not processing the data based on the raw video material, but rather on metadata stream provided by the sensor. Because I think what we believe will happen, and we believe that's already happening, is some kind of hybrid system rather than pure cloud or pure on-prem, where you do have a possibility and more cost-efficient way of analyzing, running some models on the edge, providing a very stable, reliable, properly correct kind of formatted metadata stream, and post-processing or further processing elsewhere, where you have much more resources, where you also have a possibility to convert this model from being a kind of frame analyzer to do a scene analysis or site analysis, where it's not really kind of connected to the data stream from one specific device, but rather, fleet of the devices in a certain location or multiple locations.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I mean, definitely, you're right. I mean, it is the opposite of commoditization. I mean, when the manufacturers now have a new role or an enhanced role of focusing on the improvement of processing reliability, then they have a huge responsibility to make sure that the data that's being fed to let's call it the given data structure, is good to use. And there's still a lot to differentiate for them. So speaking of those vendors, right, of those manufacturers, so a lot of the vendors are building their own AI pipelines. And why is it important that this is AI generated metadata, that this AI generated metadata can move across different vendors and solutions instead of staying in one ecosystem?
I think it's pretty much the same logic as we discussed, at the first steps of ONVIF, what problem we were solving. And what does it do for the end customer? We don't want to create an ecosystem where you're locked into the specific vendor for all your future. But also, I think we're forgetting a very, very important role in our ecosystem, and this is system integrators. System integrator getting a task from end user, asking to solve a specific problem, and unifying ways of communication between devices or sensors across multiple vendors providing system integrators the freedom of choice of the components they can use in order to fulfill their customer demand. So again, unified interfaces for metadata or AI data in whatever format it is, it's not only solving lock-in problem for end customer, but it also provides system integrator possibility to serve this end customer in the best possible way, even at the design stage. So I think it's a very important topic that we're discussing, and I think we're pretty determined to continue working on AI standardization to achieve that because of the reasons above.
Take a side quest for a second and get back to the line of questioning. Like, what's something about this space that keeps you up at night? Something about this topic?
I think, you know what, driving today to the office on radio was a statistics from Spotify. I don't remember exact numbers, but they said that it's very high percentage of the content that AI produced. I thought, well, that's not really what I want to listen to. So my biggest concern at the moment is how can I trust that the content I'm interested in, whether it's music on a streaming service or it's video evidence of a crime, that it's authentic. So I think this is actually very interesting. If you think about that, the advancement of the technology make it easy to produce content, but also alter the content. And the entire industry is actually working based on the assumption that the content that I have is authentic, and I should use it as a base for my analysis or investigations, or even as evidence in the court of law. So I think this is something that's I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but yeah, it's a concerning thing to consider.
Yeah, deepfakes are a real problem, and it's like the AIs that we have to use to detect the AIs, and otherwise it's getting so good, right? And it also brings up maybe a parallel thought in my mind around synthetic data, or the use of synthetic data to build these sorts of systems. And for example, like, Axis has been doing this for quite some time, and they've used real data, as is many of large manufacturers in the industry when they build something like object detection for deep learning models. Okay. And so, but there is an aspect where new entrants will come in and they don't have the budget or the means in order to do the same thing. And it makes me wonder, what are they licensing to skip that amount of work? What are they using? Are they using generative AI to create synthetic data in their object detection algorithm? And how is that different from the real stuff and its accuracy? I guess, and the reality is, like, we have products that have to get put in the physical world, and the customer has to see that they work. A lot of times the larger deployments are not going to do it unless they have some type of demo or proof of concept. So it's not like that. Even if there are new interests that come in that build purely, let's say, on or mostly on synthetic data, that they won't get exposed by their own customers at some point. But it does make me wonder that we've got the deepfake, which is a huge problem, right? But then there's the other side of the stuff that manufacturers are using, or the means that they have, especially the new interests coming in to do vision modeling. What's the data they're using? Where did they get it? Do they license it out a lot of times? Do they build it with synthetic data means? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or I could just be going another Dawn side quest too.
Yeah, well, I think the truth is, well, not the truth. The reality is somewhere in between, because as we talked, the output of the AI model is based on how good this model is, but also how good it's trained. What's the data it's been trained on? If it's only been trained on a certain set of objects, it will only be good at that set of objects. It will not be good at anything else. This is where I think we have a problem of biased models. The better training procedures for the algorithms manufacturers has, the better accuracy you will see. And as you said, getting data for the training is difficult. It's very costly, and this is where synthetic data for training gets more and more advanced. And I think the services for providing synthetic data getting better and better, but still there is obvious risk of solely trusting that the data you have will provide you best ever algorithms as an output. Need to be a combination of both real world testing, real world training, but also synthetic.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for that. So on the when we were talking about the idea of a common language before, even prior to this next question, I was thinking about this, is where, say, in the AI development world, they use something called Model Context Protocol. And Model Context Protocol is the common, globally now accepted common language developed by Anthropic for context and tooling for AI agents, and at what they would say at the time of inference. So basically, I need to go tell my agent to go do something, or the agent goes and does something on my behalf without my request, let's say. And it will go call on whatever tool, the CRM or ERP system, through that CRM or ERP system's own Model Context Protocol server. And so it's writing the API at the time of inference using the power of LLMs, right? Okay. So it does make me wonder that, like, if we'll ever look at that from our perspective, not necessarily MCP, but something that creates this universal language. And I use the example, like you said, I'll use the example like you said earlier, Swedish versus English. English is the common language. But for you to speak on this podcast, you have to know you're fluent in English. But there are aspects of, maybe not now, in the future of future podcasts, but there are systems like Microsoft, I think, is starting to do that now, Microsoft Teams, where they will do a live translation on the spot. So what's happening is it's taking my input and it's giving you back the common language at time of inference, right? Kind of like MCP a little bit. So the question is, there's also been a lot of industry discussion around that language for these AI systems to communicate, let's say like MCP or Model Context Protocol. So how do you see something like that fitting into what ONVIF is exploring?
very well, actually, and just very short. MCP is definitely one of the technologies been discussed and and prototyped around. So it's definitely, as you said, some of the technologies becomes de facto standards, and MCP is getting a lot of traction, and we're discussing that. So it's definitely a possibility for us to see how the implementation would look like based on the MCP. MCP is a part of our discussion. That's very short and consistent answer to that question, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, even as my firm has explored MCP, I do, though, have concerns, because if we know the workflow, the thing we're trying to accomplish, we just build the API for it, or there's already plugins, the systems that exist, and that is a targeted connection between applications that has a purpose. MCP, however, is, based on your user permissions, you could go read, write, or that's within the bounds of that user permissions. And where I'm concerned, especially in our world, is if that increases or will increase the likelihood of a cyber issue known to Gen AI systems today called prompt injection. So, and so it makes me think, if we did adopt MCP, then is a video surveillance security system a sophisticated prompt attack away from infiltrating video access to a VMS system? I don't know. Or even the network actually is probably a bigger.
I think it's a reasonable concern, definitely, and cybersecurity from multiple angles is something that our members have on top of their head. But as you're mentioning, with the development of the new type of protocol like MCP, the threat base is changing. You're getting additional areas of exposure. So that's something that definitely that's both us as a standardization organization for the interface as such, but also our members who are responsible for actual implementation of that will need to look very, very closely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank you. Be exciting. I'll keep my eyes out. So one theme in your writing is digital trust and authenticity, and especially with deepfakes, which we literally just covered. So from your perspective, how does ONVIF think about certifying that video or media is original in a AI heavy world where synthetic content is easy to create?
Yeah. So first of all, there is no other industry than security that produce as much content as we do. Not even close. Just count number of cameras in the world and you'll see how much gigabytes, or how you even measure that, of data that has been produced every second. And it's produced for several reasons, either to be analyzed and take action on it. This is where all the live analytics comes to play, to create a certain event that someone else or some other system can react upon. obviously through an ONVIF interface, or it's something that you use as a forensic evidence. Something happened, you see your footage, you try to analyze either visually or by AI, like agent searching through the video database, finding a man in a red shirt, whatever it might be. But there is a great trust in the fact that the content that's been produced, analyzed, stored, and searched in is actually real. And we see a very interesting thing happening now where tools that generate or alter content become so advanced so you cannot really with the naked eye see whether it's faked or not. It's fantastically well done. And another thing, those tools are literally widely accessible and free of charge in a lot of cases. That makes it very, very easy to fake security video. And we hear a lot of comments from juries and lawyers around the globe saying that presenting a video in the court of law becomes a little bit problematic because your opponent might claim that they have a reasonable doubt that this video is not authentic because there is so many tools and they're available and everybody can do. Can you really prove that the whole chain from the device to the video screen that you're watching haven't been tampered through the whole chain, that no change has been done to this footage? And today there are a lot of technologies present where you can watermark your content one way or other. The problem is you watermarked it at your computer, for instance. Are you sure that the content that you're watching at haven't been compromised on the way to your computer? Because it's been passing through the camera, through all the network, which can be spanning across multiple continents, hundreds of different servers. You don't know. So what ONVIF is doing, and specification work is done. So we're working on the way to create conformance, how you can certify that. So this is where we're at. We're working on the solution where the content is actually marked with a unique signature at the very beginning, at the sensor level. So it's actually in the hardware that's recording that. This is where we put a secret signature that's unique for that specific product. What it really means is that if any bytes or frames of this footage been altered somewhere along the whole chain of commands, the verification part will say, no, it's actually not authentic footage. Something happened with that. What also is interesting is that you will actually know at what exact time the footage was taken, not from the overlay that is possible to fake, but from actual data, in the device. And you also will know what device has been taken. You will know the serial number. You will know the manufacturer. So you will actually able, by reading the signature, pinpoint what device been used to record that, and you will know that this video is actually authentic. So that's how we try to secure the whole chain of commands from the actual sensor to the viewer. So this is what we call the video authenticity initiative that we are working.
It brings me back to something you said earlier around trust. And now it makes me wonder that manufacturers won't be fighting for the best necessarily algorithm or the processing and reliability, but probably what's the most trusted video to use as deepfakes, and maybe that becomes a problem. I do wonder, like, outside of what happens in on-prem closed systems, if it goes into the cloud, if there will be some sort of, and this is your world versus mine, right? So forgive me for the question if it doesn't make any sense, but I start to think about things like blockchain tech, that helps me understand that whether data has been tampered along its path, at least from like a cloud perspective, because I feel like there's so much more to tamper with in a cloud system than there is in a closed loop. So I don't know if you've ever given that any thought or if that's in discussions, but that's what has come to mind.
Yeah, no, it's definitely in the discussion, and again, we're always talking about AI, but what I don't want that we do is talk about AI in isolation to that specific technology, because we always need to understand what tool chain it lives in, what technological ecosystem it lives in, and you cannot disconnect it from cloud, because this is where a lot of resources reside today. This is where you have, again, almost unlimited possibilities for your processor power to analyze. And if we talk about trust, it can not only be built around AI as a technology itself, or where we're securing the content by watermarking footage or putting a specific signature. It needs to be taken in the context of entire ecosystem, including your cloud cloud ecosystem and cloud infrastructures, how those are working with cybersecurity questions. But you're right. With the advancement of the technology, advancements of the risks associated with that increasing equally.
Same thing that keeps you up at night in the industry keeps you up at night. So maybe I'll see you in the dream world and Inception, and then we'll fist bump and be like, let's go attack. It's like Stranger Things, like the thing that's on Netflix. I'll meet you in the upside down and we'll go attack the demigorgons or whatever together. AKA deepfakes. So yeah, so I want to touch on for a question for the operators, which might be a culmination of the things you've already said, but I think formatted in a way that talks to the security operator that might be listening into this, right? So you said that the industry needs to move from reactive to proactive, but how does the standardized AI metadata, for example, actually help an operator prevent something rather than review it after the fact?
Well, two things here. First of all, we talked about the amount of data that our industry generates, and it's literally impossible to see all of it. So there is no operator that will be sitting in front of 10,000 screens and watching and trying to understand what's happening or what might happen or escalation that's on the way, etc. So I think the possibility to highlight for the operator what's really important can help us to go from reactive, like analyzing what happened, to proactive, prevent what might happen. So let me give you an example, and I get back to where ONVIF and all of that. So in the system where you have a crowd management or crowd detection type of analytics, a concept, if your analytics detects certain movements that's not according to what you expect, something anomaly, a lot of people, big crowd moving in a certain directions, or it's scattering all of a sudden, this is something that might indicate that this is something happening. Either it's already happened or just about to happen. This is where I think this video needs to be brought in front of the operator. So operator only see what's really, really important. But ultimately, you should be able with your algorithms detect behavior that might lead to unpredicted and unusual behavior of the crowd. That, for instance, one individual walking in a completely different directions, in a completely different appearance. I don't know. So that deviates from what the system might expect. Nothing have happened, right? Apart from detecting an anomaly that's most likely harmless. But if that put in the perspective of analyzing the overall picture, it might help to prevent a certain incident. This is where we're moving from reactive system analyzing what happened to proactive. It haven't happened yet, but it might, based on the analysis we've done of the current state or previous state. And this analysis data might come from different sensors. And probably it requires multiple systems to be analyzed within in order to provide this single event, turning the operator towards the screen and saying, you know what, you need to look at that, or you know what, you need to call the guards, or whatever it might be, the rules engine for that. So this is where I think it's extremely important that interfaces between those systems work in consistent way. So the system that you really need to deploy can be deployed without massive engineering hassle connecting to unknown interface. So yeah. I think it's really something that's industry trying to work forward to enable the possibility to prevent things rather than correcting what already happened.
Yeah, I mean, because after all, I mean, the end user, the operator in this case, doesn't need a side job to also figure out how there's inconsistencies across a global system or a national system. They just need to focus on the investigation and not say, could there have been a tamper on the edge, or could there have been a misunderstanding of the metadata or something, right? So those standards is great, especially for our industry where a lot of the people using the systems may not be very technical, even try to audit that, much less try to open up a case with their manufacturer to investigate. That's another thing for the manufacturers, to eliminate those sorts of edge cases that come up to help the customers through the outcome that they want, which is just to, let's say, be proactive, or at least when they know when something happens, is to help reduce liability for their company, as many are risk officers. So let's talk a little bit about AI's limitations, right? Like, I feel like this question does kind of haze like generative AI a little bit, but I don't know how relevant it is to the deep learning that we've come accustomed to in the industry. But where do you see the current gaps right now with AI's limitations? Like, is it model accuracy? Is it context? Is it edge deployments? Is it even market education?
I think it's a lot of market education. The technology pieces are there, and we see over the last couple of years massive increase in compute power on the edge, making it possible to actually run models very close to the actual sensor that provide fantastic scalability for the solution, but also improves the overall cost of ownership of that type of systems. I think the challenges is actually all, as with any technology, is understanding its limitation and educating market what limitations are there, connected to your specific application of that technology. It's very difficult to talk on general terms about limitation on the sort of technology. But if we apply that on top of a specific use case, then it becomes much more easier to discuss, what's the limitation, how to overcome them, what needs to be done, where the issues are, and how to safeguard that from different threats. But if we kind of forget about the application, I think one of the biggest problem connected to the AI today is actually a misunderstanding, lack of knowledge, education. It's still a lot of hype around that. And hype generates a lot of misconceptions, and for the lack of better understanding, you provide your own version of what you think it is. And this is, I think, something that we as industry players together have responsibility to address, educate. And this is what you're doing with your podcast, which we appreciate massively. I think a lot of education need to happen, but ultimately, when we start to narrow down the general technology to the applicable case for the specific type of installation or use case, this is where actual deeper discussion need to take place. And those limitations might be of different character. It could be a compute. In some cases, it's as easy as throughput available, on the network to transmit the data. We spoiled in some parts of the world with very advanced infrastructure built up, but that's not the case everywhere. And to transmit video from 5,000 cameras to the single location where you want to analyze that's difficult. That's very, very difficult. That's a limitation. So knowing all of those parameters help you to understand the limitation for the specific use case resolution.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because you did lead me into the next question. But before I go into that, this does remind me of my own AI automation agency, where there's a gap between a power user for ChatGPT and actually applying AI to work in a post-training environment. And meaning you get a lot of imagination here, which is good, but it doesn't. The worst part about it is not the imagination itself about how they can apply AI. It's the distraction to the problem that we should be solving is the bigger problem. But just on the hype versus reality is being able to know like where these things are good and where they can drive the best results is super important. And you're right. We live in an industry where there's endless demos, but demos are not production. And to put it into a live environment is a totally different
Absolutely.
situation. Yeah, and I won't say any names, but certainly I've seen in the industry where the marketing is overkill for sure, or at least it seems that way based on what I know about the manufacturer versus what it can actually do. And that's just not right. That's just, you gotta be honest with people. And if your product's not really ready yet or suited yet for the marketing description that you're pushing out or the narrative you're pushing out, then find some other way to sell what you're selling, not that way. So on that note, so when we think about, let's assume for a second that marketing is a problem with AI in our industry. Maybe it is. Maybe you disagree. I don't know. But how do standards help cut through that overpromise and make it clear what a system can and cannot do?
So I think standards will not solve that entirely, because what we're focusing on is being extremely clear within the scope of standard, what is working, what is not. So within the certain kind of frame, what components of the technology can be used, and I wouldn't say guarantee, but at least certify that parts of the system been implemented in accordance to the specific standard. But see that as as a base of fundamental stones of the building, where manufacturers putting all other bricks on top of it to make the differentiation. So standards will only be good as long as you move yourself within the domain of the standard. As soon as you get to the manufacturer specific API implementation or specific functionality, and I think it will always be manufacturing desire to do something on top of that, and that is not included in the standard, because manufacturers need to differentiate. This is the way of preventing them to be commoditized. So there's always be differentiation, desire, and you do it outside standards. It will be impossible to do it within. Right? This is what standard is all about. It's standardized. So I think standards will provide you a certain degree of failure safe, of fallback type of scenario where you feel yourself safe and secured. But I think it's coming back to the information and the education piece. It needs to be very clearly explained. I think ONVIF is doing actually a good job explaining our role and what type of use cases we're solving. And it's not 100% of the use cases that security industry will have. It's not. And we shouldn't be doing that, because we need to be doing the stuff that everybody need to do anyway. Let's just agree on a common way of doing it. But the things that every manufacturer want to use for its own differentiation, that's all about education. Expectation management, education, marketing accuracy, and ultimately proof of concept test in the scalable environment. This is how I see it.
So it goes back to trust. Trust is the new currency. I feel like it, and I've saw this months ago when the deepfakes and the AI video generation came out. To your point, I'm the same way. I'm a millennial. When I see video content, if it doesn't come from a person that I know, it's like almost pure entertainment. Like in the case of Sora 2, where OpenAI made an app specifically for that, which actually I like, because that way I know if I go there, it's all fake. But if I go there, it's for entertainment. But if I'm online and I can't differentiate the two, there's a aspect where it's like a video, like there's a Guillermo del Toro is like as a famous director that when he makes his movies, he also has in parallel like another movie that explains how he made it. And a lot of what they do is they make things manually like they used to make movies, right? It doesn't mean that, the budget should be massive to maintain all movies, but I do think there's a level of appreciation and human ingenuity and taste that I don't know how long that's going to last. Hopefully it lasts forever. But certainly if I can't distinguish between those two as a consumer, at least from my perspective, that's been quite annoying. I want to talk to you a little bit about, as you start to take us home here on this podcast session, is looking ahead a few years, right? Let's assume ONVIF gets this, whatever the future AI standard will look like. Let's assume you get it right. What does that world look like? Like what does a multi-sensor, multi-vendor, AI-powered security environment look like if ONVIF and the manufacturers get this right?
I think we'll probably will see, or hopefully we'll see systems that can connect to the sensors, get the data, analyze that at the location where it's most suitable for the use case or for that specific customer. The systems are connected to each other to facilitate wider analysis of the data. Again, video cameras are not only, video sensors. It produces massive amount of information that can be used. And creating interfaces that can share this data across multiple systems, or even system-to-system interfaces, I think will provide fantastic opportunity for deploying and developing application that ultimately will make life of our society more safe and secure, because this is what this industry is on a journey to do. This is our mission: keep our citizens and assets safe. That's the aim of the industry. And if we can help industry to continue growing on this path and really helping them to build enablers, technological enablers, or kind of marketing enablers to do that, we're done. We achieved something that very good.
I love that. So good. We do have one last question. We're going to have end users that are listening in, that they're buying cameras right now. right? They probably got assigned an order right after this call. Who knows, this session that they listen to. And I think about them regarding, let's think of FOMO or fear of missing out with what this new standard could be. Well, actually, I would consider integrators and consultants in that mix, but what should integrators, consultants, and end users be doing today to, let's call, future-proof for these ONVIF AI standards so they don't get locked out when AI and cloud features become mainstream?
So I think one question to ask for your system provider, maybe not necessarily ONVIF, but does it follow any industry standards? I think very important question to ask and understand how open your system is. And I mean, open doesn't mean not secured. Open is integratable, that it's possible to integrate it. So I think this is the question to ask, and it should be one of the first questions consultants should put in the tenders, like how open is the system really? Are the APIs open? Is there a license? How does it work? Understand how will it be possible to build on your system in 5 years if you need to add additional level of functionality. And again, for the people active in the industry, ONVIF is a fantastic place for collaboration and talking to your industry peers. And as an organization, we're open to everybody. So everybody can become a member. And through that, you can actually not only have a visibility in the current work, but also participate and actively affect the work, contribute to this work. So I think it's kind of an invite, as I said in one of the first sentences in our podcast today. We're a member-driven organization. If you want to drive these standards in a certain way, become a member, you have the tools to do that. So, yeah.
Leo, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this last hour with you, and can't thank you enough for your insights, your expertise around ONVIF. I learned a lot today. I'm sure our listeners are going to learn a lot as well, and hope to see you around soon.
See you around. Thank you.